Hello, welcome to the Prime Podcast. This is our 18th episode, and I'm here to talk about the week in technology news, including topics relating to Google and their new Acer C7 Chromebook for $200, the new flagship Droid or DNA from HTC, as well as Google Fiber officially launching in Kansas City, as in being actually installed in some homes already, and when exactly Verizon's 4G LTE network will be completed. So let's go ahead and start out with our first article, which is that with the Acer Chromebook, which I mentioned just a little bit ago. Now I almost said Samsung because just a few weeks ago, Google announced the new Samsung Chromebook, which is now a pretty impressive $250 Chromebook powered by an ARM processor. That processor allows the Samsung Chromebook to be very thin, very light, while also offering good battery life and performance, all for just $250. Essentially, Google took the old Samsung Chromebook that sold for like $500 and found a way to make it smaller, faster, lighter, all having similar performance and battery life, but half the price. So it's pretty good stuff there from Samsung. And if you aren't already familiar, Samsung isn't the only one who's made Chromebooks in the past. Acer has also made Chromebooks around the same $500 price tag. And, $250 is a pretty good deal. Acer's actually making an even cheaper Chromebook for just $200. And that is the new Acer C7 Chromebook. You'll sell for just $200. And for the money, you're getting a very similar 1.6-inch display at 1366 by 760 resolution. Overall, the display is overall pretty average. It's bright enough, but outdoors it's not quite bright enough to be used constantly. But for the money, it's good. It also has an Intel Core series processor. It's unspecified. It could be any kind of core processor. It could be Core i7, doubtful. But most likely some Core i3 sort of chip in there, probably one of the lower end ones, or some cheaper version of the Core IC or Core i3. It'll be interesting to see how that Intel processor compares to the Exynos 5 dual ARM processor inside the Samsung Chromebook, because in the past actually Intel processors have been much faster. Although at the very, very low end, these ARM processors might actually be faster, and if they aren't faster, they're very similar. And the real benefit is the battery life. I'll mention the battery life on this Acer C7 in a bit, and you'll really just see the benefit of this ARM processor on the Samsung one. But anyways, along with that Intel processor is an HD camera, Wi-Fi, and an HDMI port, just like the Samsung Chromebook. But to make this Acer C7 cost just $200, Acer and Google had to make some sacrifices. One of those is the battery life. You only get 3.5 hours on a single charge in this thing. That's not very impressive at all. Pretty much all notebooks these days can have at least like 4 hours at least. This is only 3.5 hours, so that's not good at all. And considering the Samsung Chromebook has 6 hours of battery life, or 6.5 hours of battery life, this is like nowhere near that. So the Samsung has like nearly twice as much battery, and that's pretty impressive on Samsung's part. But Acer, on the other hand, not so much. But you are paying $50 less, and I assume maybe you would get this if you, let's say, didn't mind having it plugged in more often, which is the case for many people, I guess. It also has 320 gigabyte hard drive, which is slower than the 16 gigabyte SSD inside the Samsung Chromebook. But you're also looking at a bigger drive, which I guess for some, if you want to put a bunch of storage, put it in movies, songs, or pictures and stuff like that, media in general on your laptop, and this is probably a good option for you. But Google is also giving 100 gigabytes of free cloud storage for 2 years through Google Drive. So if you get this, you'll still have 100 gigabytes in the cloud either way between the Samsung and the Acer. So if you don't mind putting stuff in the cloud or using built-in SD card slot, it's not that bad of a deal. And generally speaking, most people are sick to the internet. You can get services like Netflix to watch movies, or like Pandora to listen to music, and YouTube to watch videos, and all kinds of image sites like Flickr. Google began selling their Acer C7 on November 13th. It's already for sale, and it'll be $200 in the Google Play Store and other retailers like Amazon. Honestly, this Chromebook is interesting. Things like the processor are faster, while the hard drive is a little bit slower, even though it's bigger. And overall, it seems to be a pretty good deal. The battery life isn't very good, but I guess not everyone needs that 6.5 hours that the Samsung Chromebook offers. Like, let's say you Just want a laptop for around the house. This would be a perfect sort of device. It's portable and it has a battery life that's long enough to last you until you can get back to the charger a little bit later on the day. So let's move on to the next article, which is actually a pretty impressive smartphone from Verizon and HTC. It is the Droid DNA from HTC. So let's go out, kind of give you an introduction to this phone. So throughout most of the year, there have been many rumors of a flagship HTC smartphone that would arrive before the end of this year on Verizon's network. And it was supposed to be some super high-end 5-inch 1080p superphone that would make the best of the best smartphones seem outdated. Today, Verizon and HTC held an event together, or that was actually on November 13th. They held the event and they announced this brand new smartphone called the Droid DNA. If you're someone who cares a lot about specifications, and this Droid DNA is the perfect phone for you. It has all the buzzwords and even more. It actually has a 5-inch LCD3 display, Super LCD3, so it's even a better display, a bigger, better, and high resolution display when compared to the HTC One X or even the One X Plus. The LCD3 means it has a higher contrast ratio, can show more colors, and the 1080p resolution is also very impressive. It actually has a higher PPI, or pixels per inch, than the iPhone 5. That's 440 PPI, and that's a first. Most smartphones nowadays have around 300 PPI, around the same as the iPhone. This has 440 PPI, which is just 140 more. So things are very, very crisp, very, very dense. And actually that 1080p resolution is the same sort of thing we find on these 40, 50-inch TVs out there on the market today. So that's pretty impressive right there. Most smartphones nowadays have 720p displays. This is 1080p now, higher resolution, and it's a pretty good deal there. To power that really high-resolution display, HTC added a very fast 1.5 GHz quad-core Snapdragon S4 Pro processor, 2 gigs of RAM, 4G LTE support, HTC Sense 4 Plus, Android 4.1 Jelly Bean, and Beats Audio, as well as wireless charging. So in other words, HTC really took everything they learned about other from smartphones they made earlier this year, including things like the One X's Beats Audio and the HTC 8X's wireless charging, put it all together in one big phone with a really good display, really good processor, really good added features, and overall really, really high-end, good smartphone. Verizon will begin selling the smartphone on November 21st, just in time for Black Friday, and a similar HTC J Butterfly launched in Japan last month. So the good news is one of the good things about this phone is that the Droid DNA is marked at a point where Verizon is no longer selling phones that come with 4G LTE for an added cost. So like last year when when Verizon launched phones like the HTC Resound, the Droid Razr, and the Galaxy Nexus, all three of those phones launched at $300, just like all the other previous 4G LTE smartphones. Verizon basically charged a premium for 4G LTE when it first launched. Nowadays, that's not the case. LTE's been around for a couple of years. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But now, it can cost $200 on a contract, same as every single other phone, including the iPhone and probably any other phone you could look for on Verizon's network. So it's a pretty good deal there. $200, you get this really high-end phone. And as you can see there from the picture, the phone looks pretty good. It looks kind of like previous Droid phones. It doesn't really look much like the, the HTC One X. So I really like the design of the One X. This has similar sort of aspects like the buttons and the small little bezel. This actually has an even smaller bezel, it looks like. But it overall looks kind of like a Droid phone of the past. Not a bad thing, not a good thing. I guess if you like the look of it, go for the phone. If you don't, maybe get a case or stick with another phone. So let's move on to the next article, and that is Google Fiber officially going live in Kansas City. So a couple of years ago, Google announced something called Google Fiber. At the time, they were looking for a single city where they would be able to first launch the product. After a year, Google announced that Kansas City would be the first city to get fiber. And earlier this year, Google actually announced the specific details when it comes to the pricing, rollout, and things like that. So yesterday, at that time of this recording, marked another pretty significant milestone in the launch of Google Fiber, because today Google made fiber live in the very first neighborhood within Kansas City. Fiber will bring 1 gigabit per second internet connections to those who signed up. users have been reporting that through Wi-Fi they're able to reach 200 megabits per second speeds, while people who are wired through Ethernet are able to reach closer to 700 megabits per second. So not quite the 1 gigabit per second or 1,000 megabytes or megabits per second, but still pretty impressive. And considering you'd normally be getting around 10 megabits per second for the same price at $70 a month, this is pretty impressive. And just a little side note, megabits per second and gigabits per second are different from gigabytes a second and megabytes a second. So if you like open up your computer, copy a file, you'll probably see around like 100 megabytes per second. And that actually translates to something a little bit different. Like 100 megabits per second is 12.5 megabytes per second. And I think a gigabit translates to a little bit more. Let's see. So 1 gigabit per second translates to 128 megabytes a second. So in other words, this gigabit connection should offer speeds that are about the same as your hard drive on your computer at home. So in other words, if you are, let's say, streaming something from the internet, it'll feel like you're streaming it just from your hard drive. The only problem with that is, of course, there's more latency. And not all websites, not all people who run websites like, let's say YouTube, they're not always going to give you that full speed. They're going to give you as much as the video is. It's a little bit different. But you really aren't going to have any issues running into some like buffering issues or anything like that. This is so fast. It's one of the fastest, not the fastest network out there, but it is like one of the fastest for the price and for the United States, especially for the price though. Google also uploaded a new video to their YouTube channel showing off the installation of fiber. For the most part, it's pretty simple. They're trying to make it as simple as possible. They'll connect a fiber optic cable to your house, which will connect to something called a fiber jack, which converts the fiber optic signal into the Ethernet jack. And then you can kind of think of that as like a modem. Then Google can connect the network box, storage box, and TV box that will act as a router, DVR, and cable box, respectively. Now that Google Fiber launched in its very first neighborhood, Google should continue to spread it throughout the other 179 neighborhoods in Kansas City. And after that, Google may be considering bringing fiber to other cities if everything goes well in Kansas City. It's all up to that. If it goes well in Kansas City, they might move it on. If it isn't very successful in Kansas City, then they might not really move it on, or at least adjust things before they move it on to other cities. Let's go and move on to our last article, which is Verizon and the 4G LTE network. I talked about the Droid DNA and how Verizon's 4G LTE network has changed significantly over the past couple of years. And so 2 years ago, in December 2010, Verizon started up their 4G LTE network in a few cities across the United States. Since then, Verizon has been adding dozens of cities each and every month. And recently, Verizon actually slowed down a bit. But when it first started launching, they were adding like 100 cities, 50 cities per month. And that was just insane how huge the network was getting. So we aren't looking at... but right now, they cover 400 cities in the United States. So we are not looking at a network that covers just the largest cities like it was when it first launched. Instead, it's covering the majority of cities, like even some medium-sized or smaller cities, it's covering them. And by the end of this year, Verizon actually aims to cover 260 million Americans. And after that, Verizon aims to have a completed 4G LTE network. So that's pretty impressive there. By the middle of 2013, their network will be completed. And by that, they mean that every area that currently has 3G CDMA coverage will be getting 4G LTE within the next 7 months. It's incredibly impressive considering that the size of Verizon network when compared to like AT&T, their LTE network, or Sprint and their LTE network, both AT&T, it's actually, I think, cover a couple, or 100, 200 million Americans, probably like 150, but Sprint, they aren't covering many people at all. AT&T covers a total of 80 cities across the United States, and Sprint only covers 7 cities. So both Sprint and AT&T have a lot of catching up to do, but Verizon did get a head start, and they should eventually catch up. But that was it for this podcast. Thank you for watching. You can check out theprime.co. It's our blog. I have everything I talked about there. And if you want to link to a specific article I talked about, just look in the description below. I have a list of all the topics I covered. Click on the link and you'll be sent over to the website, theprime.co. And you can read the article. I upload stuff daily on the website, theprime.co, so you can check out that. So you can see the latest news, up-to-date information, all that kind of stuff. And you can also check out this YouTube channel, theprime.co. That's the name of this channel as well. You can subscribe. If you subscribe, I'll be uploading videos weekly. 2 videos a week on Saturdays. I upload these podcasts just like this, talking about the week in tech news. And on Sundays, I actually upload gaming videos. I have a ton of stuff planned there. I recorded probably like weeks and weeks and weeks worth of Need for Speed Most Wanted. I got a comment earlier this last week of someone wanting me to do more Minecraft. I did Minecraft in the past, so I'll probably do more when 1.4 comes to my server, redhelvet.com. You check the server out. And I also started recording Need for Speed Carbon on the very last race of that personally right now. But I have hours and hours and hours of that recording, so weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of that. And I also have some Borderlands 2 I'm recording now. Got that game on Steam. And I'll have weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of that eventually. So Call of Duty probably 2, Zombies, and the campaign. I have a ton of stuff planned for there. And if I have too much extra videos, I may actually do 2 gaming videos a week if it works out well. So stay tuned for that. If you have any suggestions on games or tech news that you'd like me to cover, just let me know in the comments below. And that's about it.